So here's the thing. One of the biggest struggles I see new players hit in Project Gorgon is just knowing what to do next. And totally fair. I mean, I've been playing MMOs for nearly 14 years. I started in Lord of the Rings Online, wandered through Star Trek Online, and currently live in a bunch of other games, including Star Wars The Old Republic. And those games are basically like an airport security line. You just shuffle along one checkpoint after another, and before you know it, you're max level with a clear idea of how gear works and what buttons to press. Project Gorgon, not so much. Sure, there's the tutorial island, but that's more like a sampler platter. The real message there is keep everything, yes, even trash, poke around everywhere, and talk to anyone who will listen. It feels manageable when you've only got 3 friendly NPCs staring back at you. But the second you step into Serbule, suddenly the game takes the training wheels off and says, okay kid, ride or die. The options blow wide open, and for some people, that much freedom feels less like fun and more like standing on the edge of a cliff. And that's why today's video exists. I'm going to offer you one possible path forward with some do's and don'ts I've picked up over the years. This isn't the way to play. PG's too flexible for that, but it is one way. And most of the mistakes you can find in this game aren't permanent anyway. The point is, experiment, explore, and find the path that feels right for you. Now, we've all been burned before. Big box MMOs are infamous for their toxic communities. It's almost baked into the scale of the game. When there are millions of players, anonymity becomes a shield, and that shield gives people permission to be the worst versions of themselves. On top of that, you've got raid elitism, gatekeeping, and the endless pressure to measure up. It's not exactly welcoming. But Project Gorgon feels different. The game leans more on horizontal progression than vertical, that naturally creates this sort of interdependence. The circles are smaller, and your reputation actually matters, and people remember how you treat them. In that kind of world, kindness isn't optional, it's practical. Snap at the only healer online today, and tomorrow you might find yourself soloing badly. So here's my encouragement. Ask questions. Seriously, Epicurus nailed it when he said, if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid. Nobody knows everything, and especially in a game as wide open as this one. And here's the best part of it. The community wants you to succeed, because when you learn and grow, you stick around. And when you stick around, so does the game. Of course, sometimes you've used up your daily quota of dumb questions, and we've all been there. The flip side of having a smaller player base is that sometimes you just can't get an answer in chat. Or maybe you've already asked the 12 questions today and don't feel like being that person again. And that's totally fair. That's where the wiki swoops in to save the day. Is it perfect? No. It's community run, so it's always a work in progress, which means the occasional gap or outdated tidbit. But most of the time, it's a solid, quick reference guide when you just need to know, where does this drop? Or what NPC does this NPC even want from me? And the best part, it's built right into the game. You just type /wiki, followed by the name of whatever you're curious about. An item, a skill, an NPC, a zone, you name it. And boom, your browser opens to the page. Super simple, super handy. Now, the wiki's great when you're looking things up outside of yourself, but sometimes the game already has the answer hiding in plain sight, right in your own inventory. Here's a feature I think a lot of new players overlook. The More Info option when you right-click an item. This little menu is basically the Swiss Army knife of tooltips. From there, you can check where you stashed that item in storage, see which NPCs like it as a gift, and even preview how a piece of gear looks on your character. And a little pro tip, it's also the only way to remotely check your favor with NPCs. Let's say I'm in Eltebule holding a potion, and I suddenly remember that Velcourt is a big fan of potions. If I right-click the item, hit More Info, then pop over to the Gifting tab, I can see my current favor level with Velcourt right there, next to his name. No running back, and no guessing. It's a pretty neat trick. So, now that you've figured out how to get information, what do you do now? What do you actually do in the game? And new players often hit this wall, the what's next moment. And if you toss that question into global chat, you'll get 10 different answers from 10 different people, and some of them will be good, some of them not so much. So to save you the headache, I've been pulling together advice from both new and veteran players, filtering out the noise, and boiling it down into some practical, common sense tips. So the first is, don't sweat combat skills early. This one might sound a little backwards, But here it is. Combat skills don't really matter much early on, at least not until level 50 or so. With a few exceptions, looking at you, research-based magic skills. Most combat skills are cheap and easy to level up to 50, so go wild. Experiment. Try out sword and shield and fire magic, whatever sounds fun. And please, please, resist the urge to reroll a new character just because you want to try a different combat build. That's a big nope in Project Gorgon. And the only real reason to start fresh are if you want to play a fairy, test out an animal form without messing up your main, or if you just want a storage mule. Trust me, I come from Star Trek Online and Star Wars The Old Republic where I have more alts than I care to admit. But in Project Gorgon, for me, 3 is plenty. But let's talk about working on combat skills. Here's a thing to know about leveling combat skills in Project Gorgon. You get the most XP by fighting mobs within 5 levels of your skill. So if your psychology is level 25, your sweet spot is mobs in the 20 to 30 level range. This isn't like other MMOs where a high level buddy can just carry you through content and rocket you forward. In Project Gorgon, you need to fight things at your level to really grow. Now, a lot of players ask about which combat skills are the best, and that doesn't really exist in this game so much. But some very good starter skills to pick up are psychology and or animal handling. They have a lot of great utility. They are great for pairing with other skills to help you level them quickly. I'd avoid some of the more costly research recipe magic skills like fire magic, ice magic, and weather witching early on. I know a lot of players who have either quit or started back at square one with those skills once they get the sticker shock from the cost of those spell research recipes around level 50. Now, here's where I'm going to step onto my soapbox for a second. Don't try to push into group content that's outside your level. Not only is it not helping you much, but it can actually drag your group down too. The devs are making some changes to curb this in in-game dungeons, but really, it's a cultural thing that the community has to work on together. And for you generous, high-level players out there, I know you want to help, but be careful about quote-unquote carrying lobies. I know it's hard to know where the line is for this, but honestly, I'd rather the community err on the side of being over-helpful. On the flip side, there are some who come into PG expecting to be carried through everything. Keep an eye out, and you'll see the repeated back-to-back requests to be carried through content. At times, it can be like helping a butterfly out of its chrysalis. You think you're doing a good deed, but you're really robbing them of the struggle that makes them strong later on. If a level 30 player with no fire mitigation wants to tag along in your Dark Chapel daily, it's okay to kindly say, "You're not ready for this yet, but I can't wait to see you here in a few weeks once you are." That's better than giving them a false sense of progress. So I actually had a recent run in Ice Caves where this exact thing happened. One player told the group they were 45-45 in combat skills, but when I looked closer, they were wearing mostly level 20 gear, and their actual skills were 20 and 17. And it showed. They were getting one-shot by ogres in the infamous long ogre hallway. When I asked why they were running a daily at that level, they admitted they just wanted the councils from selling gear drops. They weren't being malicious, but every time we rezzed them or patched them up, it cost us resources, diamonds, advanced first aid kits, the works. Once they realized the group was spending more to keep them alive than they were making from drops, they were a little embarrassed, apologetic, and honestly a little grateful that I explained it. And that's the kind of conversation we need to normalize in the community. Be gracious, be honest, but also be firm at times. It helps everyone play better, and it sets new players up for long-term success instead of short-term games. On the flip side, if I see someone asking for help who has tried to do something multiple times and in various ways, who is still struggling, I'm a lot more inclined to step in and help. So I guess my point in all of this is just to say, new players, unless you're playing hardcore mode, which you really shouldn't in the beginning, there aren't any penalties for dying. In fact, you gain dying XP, which is helpful, so give it a few tries before you ask for help. Try getting that answer for yourself before you ask. And for vet players, at least consider the balance between being helpful and enabling codependent players. Now, my next piece of advice is about animal skills. You should hold off for now. Animal forms sound exciting, and honestly they are. Who doesn't want to stomp around as a cow or run wild as a wolf? But here's my strong advice. Don't jump into animal skills too early. And here's why. First, the trade-offs are steep. Once you're in animal form, you lose access to almost all storage in Cerbule, and that's a huge handicap early on. You'll also find it much harder to work with key NPCs, the very ones you need for training, favor, and storage. Forget about mounts too. Until you unlock the animal mount form, you're stuck hoofing it everywhere while your friends ride by, at least for most beast skills. And on top of that, you're stuck with beast speech. And trust me, even at max level, it's more annoying than fun sometimes. And while it is possible to undo animal form, it's expensive, time-consuming, and not always guaranteed to be easy. Finally, you're locking yourself into a narrower range of combat skills, which can feel limiting and frustrating before you've even had a chance to explore the breadth of the game. I've seen too many players get excited, pick up an animal form early, and then burn out or quit entirely because they suddenly felt trapped. The smarter play is to wait until you've got a solid foundation, a main combat build at higher levels, a steady stream of income, and a working knowledge of how the game fits together. Then, when you do dive into animal skills, you'll have the resources and experience to enjoy them without feeling like you've painted yourself into a corner. Animal skills can be amazing, but they're a mid to late game treat and not an early game starter kit. Next, I would advise that you save most crafting for later in the game. Now, crafting. My honest take, save most of it for in-game. Crafting eats up resources fast, and it's much more efficient to stockpile materials and level those skills in big bursts later. Now, the big exceptions, in my opinion, are cooking and alchemy. Food is ridiculously useful for regen and for mitigation buffs, and alchemy takes all kinds of trash items and turns them into actual tools. Also, many NPCs take foods and potions as favor items, so it can go a long way towards helping you get their favor up. You'll also want to nudge blacksmithing, tailoring, tool crafting, and leatherworking to level 25, since those unlock augmentation skills later on. After that, park them until you're ready. If I could go back, I'd spend a lot more time early on in gathering and crafting support skills. Things like foraging, skinning, butchering, gardening, tanning, textiles, and surveying. And I also, I get it. I know you want to craft your own gear, but the catch is the mats for gear at level X usually come from mobs 20 levels higher than that. So unless you want to sink a fortune into buying mats off other players, even if they sell them, it's usually smarter to just farm dungeons at your levels for free drops and save the full-on gear crafting for min-maxing at endgame. My next piece of advice, and one that I think is one of the most important, is to manage your stuff. Now, it's tempting to vendor all the random junk clogging your inventory, but slow down. Remember that what looks like trash in other MMOs might be the backbone of a recipe later on. Those pig stomachs you thought were trash, yeah, they might be worth thousands to a cheesemaker desperate for rennet. Almost everything has a use later, so keep it, stash it, and thank yourself down the road. Now, even better, a lot of those junk items double as gifts for NPCs, and favor with NPCs is the real economy of Project Gorgon. Favor unlocks cheaper training costs, new hangouts and missions, better shop prices, storage slots, and even consignment options. And storage in particular is huge. In Serbial alone, Marna, Joey, Ivan, and Charles Thompson can each give you up to 56 slots at max favor. Add in Red Wing Casino storage, horse saddlebags, council storage, transfer chests. Yeah, you'll be swimming in space eventually, but only if you prioritize favor early and often. Now, what about making money? With everything you loot being saved for favor items and future crafting, getting enough councils to get through the game may seem daunting. Now, the wiki has a great article on this that you should definitely check out. In-game, you can type /wiki making money to see a great guide on several different methods for making councils as a new player. To give a quick summary, though, it's recommended to sell any gear you aren't using for favor or equipment. Farming dungeons for gear is a reasonable method for getting some cash. Certain skills like surveying, cooking, and skinning are also reliable methods for getting councils. You should also check out the work order and player work order boards outside of Serbial Market. Filling work orders levels the industry skills, which gives you access to more work orders later. And player work orders are often placed by people who are willing to pay a little bit extra for someone to do their material farming for them. Just be sure to check with a veteran player you trust before picking up a player work order, as there are some players who try to lowball unsuspecting newbies with unfair prices. You can always request a price check on certain items in the trade channel also. Next piece of advice is don't neglect first aid, armor patching, and endurance. These three are survival skills, and they're worth grinding up alongside your combat. Always keep your best first aid and armor patching abilities on your sidebar and use them every 60 seconds, even if you don't technically need them. You'll get XP for every enemy you kill in that window. These skills not only keep you alive, they unlock critical utilities like Treat Disease, which can clear status effects from broken bones to alcohol poisoning. Endurance is a little different. You level it by losing armor and then defeating enemies. The more armor you lose before winning, the more XP you get. Ratkin fish tenders are notorious for shedding armor quickly, which makes them great for endurance farming. And here's why it matters. Lots of gear has endurance level requirements. So no endurance, you can't equip that gear. Lastly, and by far the most important piece of advice I can give you, is to participate in the community. Project Gorgon isn't just about grinding skills or farming dungeons, it's got a ton of community-driven events, and the crown jewel of those is the Poetry Jam. Every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern, players gather at the Chortling Beaver in Serbial Keep. And if that time doesn't work for you, especially for our Eastern Hemisphere friends, there are flipside jams about once a month at 2 a.m. Eastern, so nobody has to miss out. So what happens at a Poetry Jam? Honestly, kind of everything. You'll get stacked with buffs from alcohol, dancing, and music appreciation. Players read original poetry from books at the podium, which gives even more buffs. There are raffles with genuinely high-value prizes. And once the jam wraps up, the party moves to the Serbial Well, where cauldrons get dropped that grant Word of Power effects and enable PvP, and statues appear that boost both combat and crafting XP. One quick PSA though, don't play music in the well area after the jam. Doing so cuts down the music appreciation buff people just earned, and nothing kills the mood faster than accidentally wiping out a hard-earned buff stack. Let's just say you might get some colorful DMs if you forget that one. To take your community experience up a level, join a guild. Seriously, the community in Project Gorgon is already good, but guilds take it up a notch. Guilds are where you'll find people willing to loan you those last few items you need, teach you surveying tricks, or just rescue you from that dungeon you shouldn't have walked into alone. Some of the best players in the game, the surveyors, the crafters, the economy wizards, are usually happy to pass down their knowledge. And unlike random chat advice, guild advice comes with accountability. These are your people, and so invest in them. So yeah, Project Gorgon can feel overwhelming at first, but that's part of the magic. It doesn't force you down a single path, which means you get to make your own. Hopefully these tips give you a solid starting point and save you from some of the pitfalls I stumbled into when I was new. Remember, don't stress your combat skills early. Lean into gathering favor. Don't burn through all your crafting mats too soon. Keep first aid and endurance in rotation, and above all, find a guild that fits. And with all that in mind, go explore. Try things, break things, ask questions. That's how you learn, and honestly, that's how you'll end up loving this weird and wonderful game. And if this was helpful, hit like or drop a comment with your own tips for new players. I'd love to hear them. And while you're down there, let me know what topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. Is there a system you want explained? A dungeon walkthrough? Maybe a deep dive into skills or builds? Toss your ideas in the comments and I'll add them to the list. And of course, if you want to see more Project Gorgon guides, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Until then, happy adventuring, and I'll see you in Serbial.